Nana's Afghan, the saga of the 30-year-old blanket. I am not the original poster. Op is you, Oksani. Originally posted to our crochet. Reprinted with permission by you, Oksani. Trigger warnings. Death of grandparents. Less than. Mood spoiler. Bittersweet story with positive, wholesome ending. Less than. I added a few extra paragraphs for readability. Backslash. The 30-year blanket. Long post, story time, but I promise it's worth it. Original post dated July 8, 2023. So, a bit of background. My grandma passed in October of 1993. When she died, I inherited all of her yarn, crochet hooks, books, patterns, etc., including the things she wasn't finished making. Nana was going to teach me how to crochet, but it was something we never got around to. I took the books and followed the stitch guides, and soon enough, I was making things. One of the things she left unfinished was a blanket, and she was probably about 20% of the way finished with it. When I first started crocheting, I just used the yarn without a second thought. I was 12 and I couldn't just go to the store to buy more yarn on a whim. So that was all I had available. But the unfinished blanket sat in my closet for years. Literally 30 years. I never told anyone in my family that I still have it. I always told myself I'd finish it someday. But someday became some other day, became some other year, and here we are 30 years along. But I finally decided this year, I'm gonna finish this blanket. The 30-year milestone seems as good a time as any, I guess. And it's always kind of been there in the back of my mind whenever I picked a project to work on. Like maybe I should stop procrastinating and just do it already. How many of you can say you've procrastinated something for 30 years? 0 tenths. Do not recommend. So I went to Joann's with one of the squares and painstakingly matched colors from 30 years ago. I was remarkably successful in finding colors to match. In fact, there's only one that is noticeable to me, and it's barely off. I figured it'd be hard to pick out any color that doesn't match exactly unless you were looking for it, and maybe not even then. And I know what color that is and have trouble seeing it. So I think I was successful. But I think that was always part of the fear in working on it. Would I be able to find the colors? But it was almost entirely unfounded. And I'm glad for it. So anyway, here it is. I nicknamed this one, Nana's Afghan, in my project tracker, and it really is. I don't think of it as mine. These aren't the colors I'd have chosen, though they are pretty, and I probably wouldn't have chosen this pattern either. But she had. And it was time to see it through. The only thing I have to do now is decide who to give it to. My grandfather or my mom. Here she be. Overall view of blanket. Closer detail of the pattern. Close-up of blanket. Backslash. The 30-year blanket. Update. Update dated November 23, 2023. About 4.5 months later. Some of you may remember a post I made a few months ago about an Afghan I finished for my grandmother, who passed 30 years ago while working on it. Here's the post. If you'd like a refresher, https www.reddit.com/r/crochet/comments/14uja5/the 30-year blanket long post story time. But I mentioned how I wasn't sure if I wanted to give it to my mom or to my grandfather. I ended up sending it up to my mom's house, but addressed to my grandfather because I wanted both of them to see it. My mom got the package and took it over to his house. And he opened it and, I'm assuming, read the note explaining its significance. He loved it. He called me right away and we talked about how we couldn't believe it had been 30 years. 30 frickin' years, he'd said. And he told me he put it upstairs, on her bed, to put it back, where it belongs. So I got to give it to both of my grandparents. Sort of. Every time I called over the past few years, he's wondered when I'd come up to see him. And I told him I didn't know when I'd make it up, but I'd do my best when I had time. For a lot of reasons I don't want to get into. I don't like going up there. It's nothing to do with him, but I avoid traveling to that area if I don't absolutely need to. About 2 months ago I got the call from my mom that my grandfather was told that there was nothing more his docs could do for him, as he'd been battling a host of late-life illnesses. I dropped everything and flew up north to see him that weekend. It was hard to see him like that, because it's not how I remembered him. But he was so happy to see me and we got to say goodbye. He passed about a month later. And again I flew up for the weekend to be at the funeral. But I'm so glad I finished the Afghan before that happened. I am so glad he got to see it, to love it, before it was too late. And while I probably would have finished it, eventually, I would have always regretted if I hadn't done so before he died. I know this is a depressing update, but in a way it's not. Because everything happened the way it needed to. It's not much, but that small bit of closure has brought me a lot of comfort. / Reminder: I am not the original poster. Op is you, Oksani. It's amazing how yarnwork can unite different generations. My aunt knit me a blanket when I was maybe 5 or so. And at 23 I still have that blanket. I love it dearly, and hope to one day be able to make a blanket for a niece or nephew of mine. I think it's so lovely they got to see it finished. My very first post on Reddit was about the embroidery that my grandmother started and I finished. I never got to meet her, but it was amazing to craft something beautiful with her. I'm glad someone else got a chance to enjoy that too. It made me tear up when he put it on Nana's bed. I have a couple of knitted items from my grandmother. She passed away more than 10 years ago. After teaching myself crochet as an adult, I held those items in my hands again and felt like the grief was fresh. Knowing how much work goes into a piece, how much love, and then holding all of that after they're gone is tough. Oop did something wonderful, and I hope they're proud. It's a beautiful blanket. And how lovely is it that Oop got to make something with Grandma 30 years later. My grandma used to make blankets and loved crocheting things for her, my mother, and for me when I visited her every time. This post reminds me a lot about her. This is a very sweet read. Op did something so sweet and something that will never be ever forgotten. I hope Op still does crocheting cause that blanket looks so cute. That was lovely. You got a big cheesy grin when I saw the final product. Bravo Op. So happy that you got to see this through, and I hope you're still crocheting. How lovely. I still have every single item my grandma, passed 13 years ago, crocheted for me. My parents have the matching baby blanket, pillow, and doll. She used to hand sew plus craft all my Halloween costumes too. What a touching story for Oop and their family. So bittersweet. I'm closing Reddit after posting this comment. Until tomorrow. I don't want to see a post that may ruin this feeling. I have a project like that for myself. My dad painted me an amazing picture when I was young, but I never got it framed. He always used to pester me about getting a proper frame for it. And I kept making excuses. The truth of it was, although I never had the courage to tell him before he passed, it was very sudden, and I was only 15, that if I got it framed we'd have to put it up on the wall. Then it would be for everybody, and not just something special and secret between he and I. To this day it still sits in a place of honor, hidden away in my closet, alongside all of the other items of emotional significance, like my mother and sister's ashes. My grandma, paternal, was quite the painter-artist. She painted in acrylic and occasionally oils. She also sketched in pencil and charcoal. I feel extremely fortunately to have many of her paintings and sketches. Anywho, her talent has skipped around the family. My dad is equally as amazing as her, although he describes all of his newly finished paintings as a new dustpan for the garage, and refuses to admit he's amazing. And my cousin is also incredible with painting, needlework. My dad is one of 5 kids, and at the time of my grandmother's death, she was living with one of my aunt's 60-year-old D. Grandma left a painting partially sketched out but not finished, and no actual paint was added yet. My aunt, D, has never drawn or painted a thing in her life. D decided to give it a go. She ended up finishing the sketch and painted a beautiful acrylic painting. It looked exactly like my grandma did it. She ended up finishing quite a few of her own paintings until her death a few years ago. She had no idea that talent was in there. I keep trying every now and again to see if I was given any surprise drawing skills from my grandma and dad, but sadly, I think it has passed me up. Fingers crossed it skipped a generation and my kids will get it. So far, my 6-year-old has done some pretty amazing, fridge-worthy drawings. We shall see. Fiberwork really can be the most beautiful, uniting thing. It takes a lot of love and time and intention to create something, but it's worth it for the people who understand and appreciate it all. Guess this is my reminder to finish the quilt I started 24 years ago. But if I'm being honest, it will probably sit in its bin another decade before I finish it. I did get a new quilting frame recently though it is still in its box. But one step closer to actually finishing it. Anyone have experience with washing old Afghans? I have googled how to, but I am still irrationally afraid of destroying an old heirloom. At this point it's a very musty heirloom, lol. What a sweet story. My grandmother taught me to knit. She passed away over a decade ago and my aunt lives in her old house and has been slowly, very slowly, cleaning it. Just last week my mom brought me a giant bag of yarn, pattern books from grandma's room. I am going to take this post as a sign to sit down and go through it.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.